So you knew about my dog, I assume.
No, I just saw the dog when I logged on.
Oh, okay. He's part of the show. Oh, I think we're live. Oh, okay. Let me get
You're
on.
on.
Hey, you guys, we're live. It is Comedians at Denny's. We have me as usual, Jay Hewlett. Chris is off filming some big movie or whatever he's doing in COVID. And our very, very special guest, Tom Cotter, who, if you guys don't know him, you're crazy. Now, I am
Well,
trying.
welcome back, Mr. Cotter.
I like it. Well played.
Welcome back, Cotter. Okay, I know we're live, but I am having technical difficulties. Here we go. Nope, not yet. Keep talking. Okay,
Yes, indeed.
here we go. Okay. Oh, we've got so many people watching already. Jennifer's watching. Hi, Jennifer. Michael Pinto, one of our regulars, and Jamie Parker, one of our regulars. They're all filtering in. Pinto's geeking out right now because he loves you, Tom Cotter.
Oh,
So, woohoo! So we'll do an intro. I guess before we do the intro, we'll just do our usual what I was voted most likely. I was voted most likely to start my own toilet paper company called Kiss My Ass.
like it.
I was voted most likely to cheat on a coronavirus test, so that's just
Very good.
yeah.
Tom, you're really on the spot. If you don't have anything, I totally
Oh,
understand.
I have to do one too?
Sure.
Yes.
Ah, I was voted most likely to not succeed. However, there's a recount going on in Georgia because the ballots are all screwed up.
That's awesome. And Michael Pinto just said you got robbed on America's Got Talent. You're right.
Yeah,
Came in
see, I
number
don't like
2.
voting because of that. But Michael Pinto,
Yeah.
impeccable taste in comedy. Thank you, Michael.
Should we go back and do a recount on that, Tom?
Yeah.
We are filing lawsuits as we speak because that was wrong, man.
Well, number 2, at least you get to own that poop emoji. So
That's true. And I was the top human finisher my year.
that's awesome. So you guys, if you don't know, Tom is very funny from America's Got Talent. I think the first comic that that was the first year they had comics on, right?
First,
you were up?
no, it was it's the first year stand-up made it to the finals, and that was
Stand-up made it
season
to the
7. But since then, there have been other guys who've made it, and gals that have
Right.
made it that far. But I was very lucky because my judges were Howie Mandel, Howard Stern, and Sharon Osbourne, which is a comedic-friendly judges panel.
Exactly. I just watched the video actually, and you did get lucky with those judges, but they all loved you, Howie Mandel, and I loved what you did when so you said choose a subject behind you, and you played that off really well. I know you had material on all the subjects, but it was so
I
funny. So he picked college, and he had really. You guys have to go watch it. He's on YouTube, and we'll definitely plug you.
What was the process like? Did you get submitted by a manager, or you didn't do the stand in line thing, right?
No, you know what? I got a call from the maitre d' at the Friars Club because they came to New York last because they were going to start filming. So they looked at all these cities and all these people, and then they came to New York, and they were at the Friars Club, and they were whining that they didn't like the comedians they had on that season. So the maitre d' at the Friars Club said, these guys are at a table, they're all complaining that they don't have enough comics. They're looking at people today and tomorrow, would you want to go down? So he called a few of us, young friarlings, and we all went down, and we got to cut the line a little bit, but we still were there. I was there for 4 hours the first day, and then we were off to the races. But I wasn't going to audition until I got that call. So
That's
very
Wow, that's amazing. Just a little serendipity there, eh?
Yeah, that's really cool. So I wanted to ask you because this freaking thing isn't going away. So I want to ask you on the East Coast, how is your pandemic going?
It's a train wreck. It's a train wreck for everybody. What I don't like is, I'm constantly being called non-essential. Now, everybody else. Yeah. My mother-in-law prefers useless, but non-essential. That's what our governor and our mayor keep saying. So in the comedy world, we've been shut down, as has Broadway. If you're a musician, a juggler, it doesn't matter what you are. If you're in the arts, you can't have an audience right now. So that part is devastating. And we were locked down for 3 solid months in the spring, and that was the longest I'd ever been at home without an ankle monitoring device. So that was very awkward. And I also felt like I was in prison without conjugal visits. So It's tough. My wife's a comic too, and her doctor told her back in March, no hugging, no touching, no kissing. So no change at our house. We've been socially distant for a decade, but it's all right. You try to make lemonade out of lemons, and it's just a tough time for the whole country right now. I heard one of the first symptoms that you can get from this is difficulty swallowing. So I think my wife's had it for 10 years. Too edgy? Is that too edgy this early? But I'm a little, it's weird. Also, we can't touch our own faces, but my dog can lick his butt for an hour. How is that fair? I don't get all this stuff. And Fauci, everybody listens to Fauci. And first he said, don't wear a mask. Then he said, wear a mask. And then he said, we're all in this together, which is actually not true. We're all in this not together. That's the point. And he also said, he said, you should stay at home, which I think is kind of mean to homeless people. And then he also said that this will pass. Well, so will a kidney stone, but it's not going to be fun. I don't like it. I don't like the whole pandemic thing. It's miserable. I'm not happy with it. I'll get over it one day.
Who's your wife, the comic?
Carrie Louise. Carrie Louise is her stage name. And
Cool.
She went further than I did on Last Comic Standing, and don't think I don't hear about that every time we have an argument. That comes up a lot.
I gotta Google her.
Yeah.
I saw her a little bit. They interviewed her on one of your YouTubes. Anyway, your YouTubes are very funny. What was it like on America's Got Talent? Like anything you expected, or just like what was your experience?
It was nerve-wracking. I lost 15 pounds. I had acne that summer, and I'm too old for acne. I had digestive issues that I'll spare you the details, but it's very nerve-wracking. Our lowest rating, I think, was 13 million, because it was the first year Howard Stern as a judge. We had the Olympics on NBC that summer. So it was just a lot of eyeballs on you, and that's very terrifying, because it's, when we work in a club, it's a bunch of faceless people, and you want to do a nice job. You want them to be happy. But when you're in front of people you went to high school with, your family, your siblings, your dad, your wife, your kids, you really don't want to drop the ball. So it's very nerve-wracking, and I was freaked out that whole summer, but it was the best thing I've ever done career-wise, so it was great.
Yeah. How many gigs? I mean, the phone must have been ringing off the hook in terms of clubs and stuff, right?
It was, I stepped in leprechaun poop, I think, by being on that show when I did. And it was very fortuitous and just a great situation because, I have 3 kids and I married a comedian because who needs health insurance? And, we always said before AGT that comedy is a dream job if you dream of poverty and rejection. So we really needed that. We needed that, and it's not just the money. It's better gigs and more recognition and, kind of a pat on the back from your peers and all these things that I've been at this for a long time, 30 years. So it was just such a nice thing. And you become flavor of the month after that show. And so, a lot of corporate gigs want to see who was the flavor of the month. So we all got gigs out of it, and it was pretty good.
I think that's pretty awesome. I was telling you guys, I was telling Tom before we logged on that I saw him in Vegas after he was number 2. And very funny. How long did that gig go? Like, was that a year contract?
We were for 2 months in the fall and then 2 months in the spring. They broke during the winter because they had a Christmas show at the Venetian. That's where we were, the Palazzo. And you know what was funny about that? We were all miserable. When no one wanted to be there because, you signed something early on and says, in the unlikely event you're a finalist, we own you. And they owned us.
Yeah.
So, to your previous point, as soon as the show's over, you're getting offers that you've never gotten before for way more money than you've ever dreamed you could get. And you have to shoot them all down. You have to say no because you're actually obligated to go do this dog and pony show in Vegas. And by the way, we were the only season that ever did that. Since then, they do one night or a weekend. We did 4 months, 4 solid months. And I lost to a dog act, as you so eloquently mentioned before. The dogs were the only ones that were happy to be there. The rest of us were miserable because we were turning down gigs for 10 times, 20, 15, significantly more than we were getting to be in Vegas. But it was still, I wanted to play ball with them because they were nice to me and put me on the show. So
okay, I remember the dogs now. No, I was staying at the Palazzo because that's where we used to stay. And I totally remember the dogs. That was so damn funny. But I thought, okay, so you had 2 months in the winter, then 2 in the.
Then we broke for Christmas. We broke from Thanksgiving until January 5th or something, and then we came back and reran it. We did really well in the fall, and they thought that we could carry that on in the spring. And it was an open-ended contract. We were, we were kind of their slaves for as long as they wanted. And when they canceled us in April, and we were delighted to be. They told us that April wasn't happening, so we were there, half of January, all of February, and then well into March, really. So it was 3 months, and then they pulled the plug.
Then you guys, they put you up in a hotel? You just lived out of a hotel or something?
We stayed at corporate apartments off the strip. We were down behind the South Point Casino.
Oh, that's far.
Yeah. And we were when you're there for 4 months, you really get to see the dark underbelly of Vegas. Because every time I'd ever been, you go for a week at a time. You do the Cellar, you do, the Riv, or you do the Trop. And that's all I'd ever done. I got there on a Monday, and I left on the following Monday. Now I was there for all this time in a furnished apartment. So you really, I don't know if Vegas is really where I'd want to live. I'm not besmirching Vegas. It's great. But I just, it was kind of eye-opening to me.
Yeah, like what would you do the whole time you're not working? Like what do you do? Like during the...
We had a gym, and there were a lot of comics. All my friends would come in and work at the clubs for a week at a time. So I had a new playmate every week, from my days on the road. So I got to see a lot of friends, and then you bond with the cast. The cast, I was pretty tight with the guys and the gals that were finalists. So we were all we commiserated that we didn't want to be there together. So that's what we did. And you go to the gym, and there's other stuff to do, Red Rocks and... We did the helicopter tour of the Grand Canyon and all that crap.
So they I did the Las Vegas Comedy Festival, and I did the first couple of years there, and then you would meet locals too that would come to the show, or you'd go out after the show, you'd talk to them, and they were just like, they were so done with Vegas, they were so over it because they just one of the job hazards. I met 2 or 3 women that were like, divorced, married, divorced. And then they'd say invariably, if alcohol or drugs or the gambling addiction didn't get the husbands, then, they just lost interest in the wife. So, it's one of those places it's got to be a tough place to live if you're in the industry.
My dad was a doctor, and his partner, when he was in practice in Rhode Island, left Rhode Island to go to Vegas. And he ended up doing really well in Vegas. And so my dad was always a little jealous that he didn't go with him to Vegas because at the time, the hospitals had so much money. There was so much gambling money and so much revenue from the taxes that they had state-of-the-art everything. And, at the time, you could buy a house for very little there. And so this guy had a private plane. He was, flying off everywhere, and he just living the life of Riley. And so, back then I thought, oh, this is a really cool place. And then I went to a medical convention in, it was like the late 70s with my dad. I was a kid, and I saw, who did I see? Freddie Roman opened for Tom Jones. And that was the first time I saw a live comic. And his last line was, he said, "I got to go now because it takes 3 of us in a shoehorn to get Tom into his pants." And I thought that was the funniest line I ever heard in my life. And that was like when I was like, oh, maybe I'd like to do comedy. But that was Vegas. That was my first taste of Vegas. I go back a lot. Whenever I go to Vegas, I give a lot of money to the homeless. I'm sorry, the topless. I give a lot of money to the topless because I support the arts. Yeah.
Actually, I just went to Vegas a month ago thinking it had opened, and there's nothing to do there right now. So
I hear it's kind of a ghost town at play.
It's a ghost town.
Plexiglass up around the tables, and
nothing's open. No, there was no comedy. Las Vegas Boulevard was dead. It was just homeless and meth heads on the street, and just nowhere to gamble. I could not wait to get home. No, there was nowhere to eat. It was ridiculous. So don't go to Vegas, you guys.
That's sad.
So Tom, how did you get started in comedy?
When I first got into show business, I was quiet and shy because I was a mime. And then in 1996, I had my first big break. It was my collarbone. I fell off the stage. I was pushed off the stage by a heckler, and I couldn't hit the heckler back because she was 9 months pregnant. And technically that was a 2-on-1 fight. But I just started doing open mic nights, and in 98, I had a date with Destiny. That was the stripper's name, Destiny. And we went to a comedy club, and I saw all these comics come out on stage, and they were, just these normal dudes, but they came out and made a whole room full of strangers laugh. And said, I want to try that. And then at the end of the night, Destiny went home with the headliner, and I'm like, I got to try that. So yeah, that's what I did. I started doing open mic nights and in Rhode Island, and there weren't many. And so when you're in Rhode Island, you either make a choice. Do I move an hour north to Boston or 3 hours south to New York? And I chose the former. I went to Boston first, and it was a great time to be in Boston because I started with Louis C.K. and Anthony Clark was big at the time, but right after me was Billy Burr and Dane Cook, and Rogan was my time, and Greg Fitzsimmons, really great. And then before me were Stephen Wright and Dennis Leary and Jay Leno. So it was a great comedy pedigree coming out of Boston at the time, and it's just a great proving ground. And so I'm glad I took that detour before moving to New York, and then I met Carrie, my wife, and we were both kind of people at the time were leaving Boston like rats off a burning ship because karaoke had come in and all the bars, all the pubs that had comedy nights just stopped the comedy nights and started doing karaoke nights. And plus it was oversaturated on TV at the time. This is the early 90s.
Yeah.
And so we said, we got to get out of here. So everyone fled to LA and New York, and we chose New York, and we've been here ever since.
So you had this desire, but do you feel like you were always funny even before all that? Like just you were naturally just funny.
I'm the youngest of 6 kids in an Irish Catholic family, and when you're the youngest of 6, you really have to act out, or you're persona non grata. No, they don't even notice you. So your parents are like, been there, done that, bought the T-shirt. So my sister, my oldest sister, there are like photo albums of every moment in her life, and by the time I came around, I make like a cameo in one of my siblings' things. So you got to stand out, and so I acted out a lot, and I enjoyed getting that rise out of people. And then in college, I entered a little talent show thing and did that, and that made me big man on campus for a little while because I besmirched the administration and the fraternities and everything.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to do it. The goal was to go to law school and just do comedy on the side, and I took the LSATs and did not do well.
And that was comedy.
So then it was, I told my dad, I just got to get this comedy thing out of my system. And that was 30 years ago. So
that's great that a doctor gave his son the blessing of doing comedy. Doesn't usually go that way because my dad was a doctor too. I did not get the blessing.
You're being kind in saying he gave it the blessing.
Oh.
But, you know what? He's been pretty cool about it. At first, the first few things I did were Ha Network and Comedy Central and MTV stuff. He can't relate to that. He's an old guy, and
right.
So all that time he'd be playing golf with his buddies, and they're like, my son's a doctor, my son's a lawyer, my son's on Wall Street, and my dad would be like, my son tells jokes in a basement. So when I finally did the Tonight Show, that was something he could relate to, something he knew of. Everything else before that was
proud
crap.
of you.
Yeah, then he was like, well, maybe he's not a waste of sperm. And then I actually have another sibling who keeps going back to the well and asking for stuff from my dad, and I haven't done that yet. So that way I get I'm not in the penalty box.
It's so
you
funny
got some brownie
because,
punishment.
I went to school with David Spade. He's a few years older than me, but
Are you an Arizona person?
I'm an Arizona person. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Excellent.
Yeah. And so he was like, he always knew he wanted to do it. It's not like, I met his mom, like even she was big into the school and everything, but yeah, he used to perform on campus and like Neeb Hall.
There's a lot of guys like that make that decision. I mean, for me in college, I started like I was like the funniest man on campus, but they had a place called the Cellar at the University of Arizona, and the big thing, Gary Shanley used to drop in there and do some time. His mom lived there, but I was always envious of guys that knew. I mean, they go, oh yeah, I'm just getting this degree and then I'm going to go on the road. And I always wondered, did you have a regular gig in between doing comedy, or
yeah,
what was
I was a cop for a little while on Nantucket, and then I knew I couldn't pursue comedy on Nantucket. There was nothing there, especially during the off season. So There's no crime either. A moped accident is a big day on the island. So I was going to leave the island. I knew I was going to leave the island. And one of the guys who had been a cop with me had left and started his own private investigation firm, which sounds cool, but it's not Magnum. There's no Ferrari. It's following around people who were in car accidents,
I
basically.
want to do that.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
horrible.
right.
I hated it. But that allowed me to do comedy at night because I could choose when to do my surveillances during the day. And I was basically a peeping Tom during the day. And then I got guys to do it with me. Justin McKinney, who's a very funny comedian who was in my wedding, and Al Ducharme, also a funny comic. We're both.
Oh, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, Al's great. And
Al's great.
I got
He's a
him
great
hired
writer.
at my firm, and we were able to, you're investigating someone during the day, and then at night you can go tell jokes, and it was a means to an end. And then finally you got to retire the day job and pursue comedy full
Hey,
time.
do you still have any investigative skills?
Do I? Why? You want me to snoop on somebody?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I really felt, Lord, I felt like such a scumbag when I did that. I
Oh.
didn't like eavesdropping, and I was parking in someone's neighborhood and videotaping them doing things that they alleged they couldn't. If they were in a car accident, let's say Jay was in a car accident and said he couldn't walk, I'd videotape him walking and bowling and weeding his garden and doing stuff like that. And it's very intrusive. But it helped me get to where I needed to get. And by the way, most of the people I was investigating, they wouldn't hire me unless they suspected the guy was a scumbag and was bilking the system. So I didn't have a lot of Catholic guilt about that. I just felt bad spying on people.
I was spied on. I was a PI after me and this is a whole other show.
Wow.
I was dating a guy who didn't know was married, but I was being followed all over the place. Anyway, that's a whole other story.
Wow.
So you that with the whole investigative thing, then you started doing comedy at night around Rhode Island, then, or
well, Boston is only 40 minutes from
Boston. Yeah, okay.
Rhode Island, Providence,
you.
where I grew up, is basically it's a suburb of Boston. Really, it's a lot of people make that reverse commute into Boston just because it's not that far. In New York, people commute 2 hours each way from the Poconos into Manhattan every day.
Yeah.
So 40 minutes isn't that bad. So and Boston was a much bigger comedy market than Providence was.
That's a great comedy market. Yeah.
So early hell gigs. What's the worst, or even current hell gigs, besides the Vegas, staying in the hotel?
You know what, Jay? I would kill for a hell gig right now. As long as I had a live audience,
right.
I would take that bullet. I'm doing so many Zoom shows. Those are all kind of hell. But I did. My dad. He hired me. Felt bad for me, so he hired me to do the New England Neurosurgical banquet, and that was one of the first gigs I ever did. And
That was hilarious.
It was horrible. First of all, they fed them dinner. It's a bunch of neurosurgeons and neurologists and and their support staff, and it was horrible. I died a horrible death. But I've also done. I can't tell you how many times I've done the gig where they showed the St. Jude's video with all the kids with shorn heads and there's no dry eye in the house, and then they say, I think we could use some comedy. Here's Tom Cotter, and then you got to dig out of that hole for 20 minutes.
Yeah, right.
So,
that's
I've done
awful.
a billion of those. But I've done so. I've had stuff thrown at me. That could be a whole other show. I've had to be walked to my car after a show because people want to kick my ass. So it happens.
Well, that's
wow.
I have a question for you. Somebody's asking if you ever worked with Lenny Clark or Joe Yannetti.
Joe Yannetti, and yes, I have. Both of them. They're legends. Those guys are both. They were the ones that I looked up to when I started. I still look up to them. But when I started, they were, those guys were the rock and roll of Boston in the 80s. I missed the boom. The boom was mid 80s. I came in at 89, and so everyone used to say to me, I feel bad. They'd say to Rogan, myself, and Greg Fitzsimmons, all these guys, you just missed the boom. But we were still thrilled. There were still 3 open mic nights a week. That's plenty. And, there was enough gigs on the road. We were all, as a feature, you can make a decent living as a middle. And so we were thrilled about it. But back then it was Don Gavin, Steve Sweeney, Lenny Clark was probably the biggest. And God, so many others, Kevin Knox and Chance Langton, all those guys were the reigning heirs. And they all left and went to New York and LA, but didn't like going to the back of the line. And they said,
Sure.
screw it. We're going back to Boston where we walk on water. And they came back to Boston. Some of them still have black and white headshots and no website, but they don't care because everybody loves them. They're so beloved that they still fill, puts asses in seats and they fill rooms and everyone loves them.
Do you,
So like the
were you ever
80s,
like at the, oh, sorry. I was going to say, were you ever at the Boston Comedy Festival? Like,
Yeah,
back
I did. I won that one in 96, I think.
Okay.
so you could, I mean, like when you got started, that's around the time I started getting paying gigs. So I finished a master's and then I was like, hey, what am I going to do with this? So, comedy on the road, that makes sense. So that's what I did. But yeah, so I mean, but there were still, at that time there was still, you were kind of getting the runoff of the mid 80s, early 80s. They were putting comedies in Holiday Inns and banquet rooms, and I worked for bookers that they had so much work they'd pass it off to other bookers. I mean, I worked for Sobel and Comedy Zones and a woman named Marty. So she was out of Tomball, Texas. I mean, you could just drive. I mean, you could book 52 weeks if you wanted.
Yeah, Sobel had the Comedy Caravan, and that was literally like 6 gigs a week minimum, and you were on the road for 10 weeks. You just never stopped.
Right. So then
it
did like mid 80s, like I think you hit it on the head, like the saturation, and then there were so many guys that were like, hey, they were working in a buddy of mine worked around the Chicago area, but he would make enough in a weekend. He wouldn't have to work the whole week. He'd be just around that local area. And this little angel, and he would work so much that he made so much money, but he this and all that. So that was part of the other, I guess, pitfalls of the road. But how many weeks a year was the most you worked when you were starting out?
I got pretty lucky early on and got into the comedy market somehow. And so I started doing the NACA and APCA thing. So
there you go.
That was very lucky for me. And because of that, I got to see a whole part of the country that I never thought I'd see. When you do colleges, you go to the most remote places, North Dakota and, upper Minnesota and places that I never thought I'd go.
You're in the car a lot.
Yeah, and then if you're smart, you can kind of book a one-nighter between 2 colleges in that area. So you're on the road a lot, and I was single at the time, no kids, so I didn't mind being on the road that much, and I slept in my car some nights, like we all do. We all have these war stories.
Totally.
And you mentioned Jay Sobel was famous for having a hole in his nose, right? You know that.
Yeah, right. I never met the guy. I just got gigs.
He literally burned a hole in the side of his nose from snorting stuff. And,
my dad was a dentist, and he used to see people go into his office with no nasal cavities. Like, that's
and they'd pay you in cocaine in the 80s. They'd say to you, I worked at a club called the Joker's Wild in New Haven, and the guy said to me, "You're an idiot if you don't take this deal. It's 3 times what I'm paying you in cocaine. You can turn around and sell it and make 3 times." And I'm like, dude, I can't pay my electric bill with white powder. Thank you very much. And there's a famous video about the old days in Boston that Fran Salamina did called "When Stand Up Stood Out." When Stand Up Stood Out, and I recommend it to your viewers and to you guys. But there's one scene in it where Tony V, a famous comic out of Boston, everyone used to come in, and this is back when TVs had the big, they weren't flat screens, so you had a big top, he drew. Because that's where everyone did the cocaine, on top of the TV in the green room.
Wow.
So he drew with whiteout. He did a little line of cocaine on top of the TV, and he sat there all night and watched all the headliners come in, and they would lunge for the top of the TV. He left the line on the top of the TV, and then they'd get close and realize it was whiteout, and it was the ultimate cock block for these guys because they loved doing the blow. But yeah, that was currency back then, from what I remember.
The good old days. Yeah, okay.
The good old days.
Did you ever do one of the things in the South that they always hook us up with? I don't know. You'd be the celebrity, so you'd be the guest judge at the local strip club, the wet T-shirt contest. I remember doing. You ever get to do that stuff?
No, I was never asked to do that. Jay Leno started in Playboy clubs though, so comedy and strip joints are definitely
they're
no question
synonymous.
We're all whores.
What's it? What's it like being married to a comedian? You've already kind of told us her name, but what is life like?
people think that because we're married, we must laugh constantly laughing. And she laughs a lot, mostly in the bedroom with some pointing. It's very disconcerting. But we have arguments. We're like a normal couple. We had a fight the other night because I peed in the shower on her leg. But yeah, we're a normal couple. At first when we moved to New York, it was a little weird because some clubs were using her and not me. So she'd get calls from the club saying, "What are your availability?" And I'd be bitter, and vice versa. Like I was working at the Cellar and she wasn't, and then Esty would call and say, "Here are your spots this week." And if Carrie answered the phone, then it was, silence for 2 hours after that phone call. So we had that, but we really weren't competing against each other. If they were looking for a funny female, they weren't looking for me. And if they were looking for a short, middle-aged guy from Boston, they weren't looking for her. So we ended up realizing that we're kind of on the same team, and the money all goes to the same bank account. And we will never get divorced because neither one of us wants custody of the kids. So we're in this for the long haul.
How does that work? Do you like when you're on the road, she watches them, or do you guys? I mean,
what road?
Yeah, what road exactly? It's unfortunately still a sexist, male-dominated world, and I've been at it longer, so it made sense most of the time for me to go on the road. And she did what a lot of women did. She put her career a little bit on the back burner to raise our kids, and it was a very noble move on her part. But now she's back into it. She just did a Showtime special last year called "Women of a Certain Age," and
I know that show.
Oh, that's my friend.
She's part of that group. Oh, wow. Okay.
Carol Montgomery, the producer.
Carol and Karen Runtalski.
Yeah,
I don't know. Carol Montgomery.
Vanessa Hollingshead was on it. Fran Drescher was the celeb.
Yeah.
And then, three other comics, but they were all great. And she had a great time, and she got a little bump out of that. So now my kids are old enough to, we can leave them at home for a weekend. The house will be trashed, but at least we know, they kill each other. And so we're both allowed to get on the road until COVID came along. And
right. No, it's both. Yeah, my friend Carol Montgomery produces that. So she's very funny as well. She lives in New York, by the way. But Carol and I went to South Korea, but 3 years ago for the Armed Forces Entertainment thing.
Excellent.
So
we love Carol. She's become a dear friend, and I love her husband, and we hang out, and they're just really great people.
Yeah, and her husband works Broadway, so I don't know what the hell they're doing.
He's a musician, and he's laid off right now too, like everybody else. They say Broadway's not coming back until May at the earliest. Our governor and our mayor just put the clamps down. We have a 10 p.m. curfew at places.
Same here, starting on Friday. Yeah.
Yeah. So who knows when all this is going to come back? I'm beside myself. I'm done being bummed out about it. I just can't.
Right.
And the worst thing is it's just getting worse instead of better after all this time. It's BS. So
isn't that it's such a gut punch that we already endured so much, and now the numbers are up again, and we thought we were doing everything right.
I know, and they went down for a while. Hey, somebody wants to know if so they really like your sense of humor. Pinto's really vocal tonight.
Pinto's awesome.
He says you're kind of similar to Ellen, where you just kind of go like this, one joke after another, and wants to know, was she any sort of influence? I'm sorry to bother you on the toilet.
No, you know what? My influence, the guy, and I say this out in the open, the guy, when you start comedy, and I'm sure you guys both did this too, you find one person to emulate. And the guys, there were really two that I emulated. Kevin Knox, who's no longer with us, God rest his soul, very funny guy. And Don Gavin, who is still with us and is still hysterical as ever. And he was the misdirection guy. And that's what I loved. It's a bunch of one-liners strung together with misdirection and double entendre and innuendo. And he does it better than anybody because he's got a thick Boston accent and a great attitude. But Wendy Liebman is of that school.
I know Wendy.
I'm of that school. Yeah, and these are all great people. Brian Kiley is very similar to that.
Brian. Oh my God, I love Brian. I want to have him.
Oh, look, I just bought his book. This is his book. I just bought it.
Oh my God, I just adore him. Like I'm
the best.
I'm friends with him. Yeah.
Off stage and on stage. I think he's unbelievably hysterical. But this will tell you how great Boston was. When Brian worked in Boston, he always had to open because he's kind of low energy and he's so funny. He would headline anywhere else in the country, but he couldn't follow the high energy, thick Boston accent. high energy guys in Boston. And Jonathan Katz, same thing. Remember Dr.
Yeah.
Katz?
Yeah.
He would always open. He had a TV
Uh-huh.
show on, and he would be the opening act at Nick's Comedy Stop. And that's how powerful Boston was back in the day.
Yeah.
And I know Arizona was great too, because I know Spade is out of there and other people. And I love the Tempe Improv, by the way. It's one of my favorite.
That's one of my
Yeah,
favorite
right.
shows I ever did.
Yeah.
So when I did the Tempe Improv, I was used to the improv out here, and it was like 5 times as big. It was like 500 people, standing room only. I'm like, I'm used to like 100 people. I don't even know. Like it, but
Was it Dan Meir that owned that? Dan Meir, was that his name?
no, it was, who was the other guy?
I don't know, but what a great room that was.
Yeah.
I loved working there.
Stand Up Scottsdale, and like it was like you could do like a few shows a night. But then there was one club. It was the Comedy Spot, which if you performed at other clubs, they wouldn't let you perform.
Oh, I hate when people do that.
I don't like that.
You know, you remember Finney Bones? Finney Bones is Michael Finney. Yeah, they had a club down there too. I worked with David Spade there. Finney Bones, little tiny place, but it was in the back of a Days Inn or something.
The last couple of times I've worked in there, I've worked at Stand Up Live, which is in Phoenix.
I've
yeah.
done that. Yeah. And you know who does that room a lot? Jill Kimmel, who's my friend too, and she kind of owns that place, but she's moving out here now.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So she's moving out.
Where
here.
are you, Lauren?
I'm in Marina Del Rey, California, but I grew up in Phoenix.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and by the way, your toilet paper it's supposed to go over, not under.
You're an over. Some people are under people.
You
I'm
see
an
my
over
earrings?
Yeah,
Oh,
there you go.
Perfect. I like it.
A little
And they're over.
bonding.
They're
A
over.
little bonding there.
That's the dog act that I lost to. There you go. If anyone wants
There
to.
you
yeah.
go. Oh boy.
I
Yeah.
think that's pretty cool. You have these customized screens. I have to learn how to do that. All I have is the one that comes with the seat.
He's ready to roll.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
These are the Zoom shows. This is what you have to do, and you have to have, stupid little props for whenever that's where we are now. You can't just be
Right.
funny. You got to have zany crap going on for these ADD people on the other side of the screen.
You gotta,
Yeah,
you
right.
gotta work with what you have. So,
That's right.
well,
Is that a Coca-Cola? Are you drinking
no,
Coke?
this is bubbly. It's sparkling.
Oh yeah, I know that stuff. Yeah.
So I gave up
Yeah.
it a long time ago, but I still like the bubbles.
Very nice.
And I almost spit this out my nose before when you were making me laugh.
That's good. That's a home run for a comic.
Right. And then my
Yes.
friend said that I flashed somebody at some point, but I was actually just plugging my computer in. So really,
Woohoo!
but,
No
yeah.
one minds a good flashing. It's
No one
fine.
minds a good flash. They were all listening to you anyways.
But he-
Jay, I love that picture behind you from the 1920s where we're all sitting on that beam. That's a great picture off to your left shoulder. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
Yeah,
you know
that's
what
right.
you can't even see, Tom, is the fax machine on the other side of him.
there's no more fax machine. But I have stuffed animals behind me somewhere.
I have a dog.
Yes, you do. Look at that.
Yeah,
That's a comics
hand
place.
sanitizer there too, Jay.
that's right. Scooby Doo, man.
Yep.
Scooby-Doo.
So I don't know if there's anything else. Amount of
Well,
questions.
I was going to ask you: Are your kids funny? Do they?
Oh, yeah.
Do you see them following in your
Not looks.
footsteps, or-
They think they're hysterical, and they are mistaken. But they're all right. One of my sons says he's going to try comedy as a hobby. He wants to be an engineer, but he said he wants to try it as a comedy because he's got, it's genetic. It's on both sides of the family. So
Yeah.
he's going to give it a shot. I'm assuming the other two will give it a shot at some point, or at least try improv or something. They are pretty zany guys, and they make me laugh a lot. They're pretty funny. The twins either love each other or hate each other, and our twins have nicknames, Israel and Palestine, because they don't really get along.
Are they identical?
No, they're fraternal.
Oh, okay. Are
Thank you.
all your kids boys?
All boys. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I would.
in the house, and I'm a dude, and that's a lot of testosterone. The other night, my wife woke up with a boner, and that's weird. You don't want that to happen. That's
You should
awful.
you should encourage them to be private investigators. Don't let them do comedy.
Or not. You know Dana Carvey.
Getting shot. Who? Dina? Who?
Dana Carvey's 2 boys. He has twins that do comedy out here, and I've been at the club with them, and they're very funny. But I think Dana writes all this stuff.
Well, I
It's like,
probably would help my sons too, I think.
yeah, it
Ray,
was
Ray Romano has twin sons that are
no
identical, I
way.
believe. And
Oh,
one of them's a page at the Kimmel Show now, I believe.
no way.
Oh
Okay.
wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. When's the last time you were in LA?
Oof. I did well, actually, just right before the pandemic, I did a corporate Christmas party out there, and it was in, where was I? I was Santa Monica. I did a little corporate bunch of doctors got together for a Christmas party, and I
Oh,
went out and
very
did
cool.
that, and then I got to see my buddies who were out there, and I got to visit a few dispensaries, which is fun because we don't have that in New York yet, and life is good.
That's awesome. Santa Monica is like hop, skip, and a jump for me. Somebody wants to know, do you have a go-to joke that never fails? Like, what's your go-to never fail joke?
Well, what I've been saying lately, and I don't know if it ever fails, but it's my favorite to say. I say that I recently started hanging the ISIS flag in front of my house, and don't judge me. The reason I do that is because I cannot afford a home security system. So my house is under 24-hour surveillance by the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA. You're welcome.
That's great. I used to joke that I put a quarantine sign on my door and no one comes around. Just
That'll
me.
keep the trick-or-treaters off your porch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, man.
Are you
That's cool.
constantly writing? Do you write like hours every day?
No, I mean, I wish I did. I wish I did more of that. I'm trying to be, during the pandemic, I was writing more just because there was a plethora of free time. So, yeah, we were doing a little of that. The wife and I were trying some stuff. And, you know, you're just trying to remain relevant during this whole
Right.
thing. So you're posting stupid videos or, you know, you're doing whatever you can to kind of keep your hand in the game because it's you know, you could really vanish quickly. And I know a lot of comics feel like they have right now because
Are
they
you
haven't
good at
done
the
anything.
social media and keeping up with like everything you're supposed to and
I'm not nearly as good as a lot of these people. And you know what I find, and we're all kind of in the same ilk here, I think, is that, you know, when we started, that stuff wasn't around. And remember,
right,
you used to have to send a tape, and
right.
that was it.
Yeah, right.
So now I find, and I'm not besmirching the younger people, but some of the younger people have such great social media skills that they're really great at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and you know, Snapchat and all these things. Yet, and so they do have a following, and then they put asses in seats, and then they go to a club and put asses in seats, and then people get disappointed because they're not, you know, they're kind of misrepresenting themselves. And as
Right.
I said before, there are guys in Boston who are so funny that don't even have a website, you know, let
I know.
alone a social media presence.
Yeah.
So they're not putting the asses in seats that maybe they should be, but if people do show up, they're thrilled because they
Right.
get a really great show. So you kind of have to find a happy medium in there somewhere.
I agree. A balance. I think.
Or hire somebody.
I think you have to. I think if you do something Facebook or Instagram worthy, people are going to follow you regardless if you're posting every day. I mean, then I see the other side of it too, where you're kind of building those butts in the seats thing, you know. But I forget who's the guy that started he started on the MySpace thing with the guys like
Dane Cook killed
yeah,
it.
I mean, yeah. So that, but then I think exactly what you're talking about. I think his social media was way ahead of where his comedy skills were. But so many young kids didn't know the difference. I mean, so it was kind of brilliant in a way.
It was
But,
brilliant. And to his credit, he definitely rode that, you know, and we all were kicking ourselves for not doing what he did. You know,
exactly.
he set the model for everybody, and we all kind of followed in that. And nobody's on MySpace anymore, but that really made him. And a few years after that, his brother stole $6 million from his account, and he didn't know. How great would it be
Seriously?
to have a bank account where you are missing $6 million
And you don't even know.
until your accountant stumbles on it when he's doing your taxes?
Yeah,
So,
right.
all
That
credit
happens
to
to me
Dane
all-
Cook. You know,
That
and
happens to me all the time.
people besmirch Dane because he came out of Boston and he was so successful. And anytime someone's successful, they want to stab him in the back. But Dane, I will tell you this about Dane. Kevin Knox was a legend in Boston, and he was very sick. And like most comics, he didn't have good health insurance. Dane not only took a night off, which for him was, you're probably losing 30 grand, took a night off, but had all of his followers fill a room to do a benefit for Kevin Knox. And that one benefit made more for Knox's medical bills than any of the benefits that we did in New York or
No
Boston.
way.
So, for
Good
him
for
to
him.
do that, and I'm, I know Dane, I'm not dear friends with Dane, but that told me a lot about his character. And I thought he was a great dude from that
I
moment.
love those kind of stories.
Yeah.
Hey, how about I did change, but how about acting gigs? Have you been working your acting muscle, or did you get any kind of offers after the America's Got Talent?
Since America's Got Talent, I've been doing a lot of acting. The other night, my wife said I was acting like an idiot, and I've been doing that a lot. And some writing, mostly suicide notes, because I lost to a dog act. But you try to do all that stuff. Yeah, I had a pilot with NBC, which is another reason I did that show in Vegas without bitching and moaning, because I was in bed with them for a pilot that ended up going nowhere. But I shot a pilot. It was about a kid's show. For some reason, they had me pigeonholed as a host of a kids talent show. So that's what we did. And then it didn't go anywhere. And then a couple of years later, the guy who hosts Steve Harvey started doing one. And he's much better at it than I would have been. So it's probably a better decision. But it was nice of them to consider me. I've shot more pilots than Al-Qaeda, and none of them have ever gone anywhere, sadly.
I think you have a lot of good things in your future still.
Your lips to God's ears, young lady. We'll see what happens.
I think you're very, very funny. Do you have any, do you want to plug anything coming up, or websites, or?
That's my book. It's called, there it is. It's called Bad Dad. I'm sorry, I've got my virtual up, so I'm going to get rid of my virtual. Because that'll, here we go, and it's none. So that's the book. It's called Bad Dad, A Guide to Pitiful Parenting. And my wife has one called Mean Mommy. So our children will be in therapy, and people can check those out. And I'm also, like a whore, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all those things. It's at Tom Cotter Comic, and people should follow me. Yesterday, Facebook suggested that I follow Angelina Jolie, but that would violate the restraining order. So I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah, right.
Hey, everybody.
But you are good at following people.
Yeah, I was compensated to follow people back in the day.
Yeah,
you're right.
You betcha.
So I'm gonna ask. So it's Tom Cotter, Bad Dad. I'll put it on our site. So. Yeah,
it's Bad Dad, A Guide to Pitiful Parenting, and it's if you're a devout Muslim or a born again Christian, this is not the book for you. Put the book down and walk away. Because I did a show, Huckabee. It's on the Christian Network. He's a reverend out of, he used to be the governor of Arkansas. He has a show and he has comics on, and it's a Christian audience. And at the end, they didn't tell me they were going to plug my book. They found out that I had a book. So at the end, and it was right before Father's Day. It was in May, and Father's Day was in June. So he holds up my book and says, buy this book, buy Tom's book. And I'm like, no, don't buy the book. And sure enough, someone sent me a video of them tearing the pages out of the book that they had purchased.
Oh my God.
They were so upset because it's got some scathing stuff in there that is not very Christian. But if you like a laugh, it's a funny book.
Oh my gosh.
Very good. And Mean Mommy, don't forget to post that up too.
Mean Mommy.
So mean Mommy. Okay. I think that's hilarious. So I'm going to say bye to the Facebook world. They loved you, by the way. I'm looking.
Well, they have impeccable taste.
They do have impeccable taste. But I'm going to keep you on just to say thank you and stuff like that. So I'm going to say bye to America.
Hey, you didn't say what you learned, Kirchner.
Oh.
What'd you learn from the show?
Oh, I learned, you go first. Oh, I've learned that in case anyone hasn't told you lately that I'm beautiful.
Nice.
What I've learned is never follow around strangers. It's creepy.
Very creepy.
Yeah. I learned from the best. Tom Cotter.
Nothing creepier.
Did you learn anything, Tom?
I did. I learned that there was even more talent out of Arizona back in the comedy days. People don't, people talk about Chicago, Boston, New York, maybe DC, Houston. Remember the Comedy Outlaws out of Houston? Yeah. But there were so many really funny people that came out of Arizona.
And also, I forgot to say this early. Speaking of Gary Shandling, he was the same age as my mom. They were neighbors, and he used to go over to my mom's house, and my grandmother would make them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Wow. I miss him. Man, he was funny. God, that was so sad.
That was
Yeah.
really sad.
I thought
Such a
he
good
was
guy.
so funny, and I hold him in such high regard.
I know. That was, I mean, yeah. When anybody dies, it's too many people right now.
Yeah,
So.
John Panette hurt me a couple years ago
Oh,
because
I
he was like
know.
one of I just loved that dude.
I know.
And
We just talked
you know,
about him. Yeah,
unfortunately, we keep losing them. It's part of life. But
it is,
God, he was
but
so great.
sometimes too young. But we had such a great time. So, Tom's hysterical. Good show. Thank you, and thank you, Jennifer, for referring Tom Cotter. She saw,
Jennifer's the best.
yeah, she saw you in Florida last week and put me on the phone with you, and I'm so grateful for her. Thank you, Jennifer. Um, and just you guys keep supporting live comedy the best way you can. Tom's still out there, obviously, so
Yeah.
um, lovely. All right, so bye to America. Bye.
America.